Welcome to Beginning Resume Writing. This information is geared toward anyone who has either never written a resume before or anyone who wants an in-depth overview of format and content. Let's start at the very beginning. An effective resume gets you interviews. That is your ultimate goal. This is not just a laundry list of your past jobs. Think of this as your career and academic highlights. So it needs to say something meaningful about you as an employee. I say this to emphasize that writing a resume is not a quick process. It's not something you can do in 10 minutes. To really create an effective resume, it takes multiple steps. So let's jump right in. First, take a minute to brainstorm a little bit. You want to think about yourself and think about your audience. Consider what your own skills, strengths, and experiences look like. Then think about the type of jobs you're applying to. Ideally, your resume will tell the reader that you have the skills, qualities, and experience needed to do the job. Now on to step 2. Before you can create a great resume, you need to get everything down on paper. Start to create a master resume. This is going to have everything you've done for at least the past 5 years. Now eventually we're going to cut this down, but it's best to have everything together so we can pick and choose what stays. So what content do you include in a resume? Well, every resume needs to have 3 things. You need to have contact information, an education section, and some form of work history or work experience. But remember when we talked about your resume really reflecting your skills and strengths? Sometimes the most interesting things about you are not jobs or not education. So that's why we also have a maybe list. Take a second to think about which ones of these apply to you. Possibilities include an objective statement, involvement, classes, projects, performances, exhibitions, volunteer experience, skills. There are tons of options, and this depends entirely on what you've done and also what you think your audience would be most interested in knowing about you. So let's take a look at a sample. So first and foremost, you can see that contact information needs to be at the top of the page. You need to have your name, of course. Email and phone number are also requirements. Address is optional, but as long as you're looking to work somewhere close to where you live, go ahead and include your address. Make sure that your name is the biggest thing on the page. And you can see that there's just one professional email address and one phone number with a professional voicemail message. Education typically goes at the top of the resume until you graduate. You can see that this student has listed Columbia first, so we do want to go in reverse chronological order for everything in the resume. You'll list your full bachelor's degree, and of course an anticipated graduation date if you haven't yet graduated. You also include your GPA if it's over a 3.0. Now you can see that this student has included their high school. If you are a freshman, go ahead and include your high school. Once you hit sophomore year, high school is cut. Same goes for transfer. If you transferred in from another college, keep that on there for your first year here at Columbia. After that, it becomes optional. You can leave it if you think it shows something important about you, or you can cut it if you need to for space. Next, this student has decided to include a relevant coursework section. This can help show that you're building expertise in a given area, but if you include it, this should be a really short list. Next, work experience. Jobs are always listed in reverse chronological order, so list them from most recent to furthest back. For each job, be sure to include your title, the company name, and the city and state where the company is located. You also want to make sure you list the dates when you were employed. Notice that these descriptions are done in bullet points. This is ideal for most resumes because it makes the job description quick and easy to read. Most of these start with strong action verbs, and you want to focus on writing job descriptions that are very detailed so that it's clear exactly what you did. If you've done any kind of freelance or other short-term jobs, be sure to include them too. It doesn't have to be a traditional job in order to be listed on a resume. Next, this student has included an involvement section. Again, this is one of those optional sections. You might instead add volunteer experiences, performances. The possibilities are pretty expansive. It's always a good idea to keep things professional. Remember that hobbies and interests rarely go on a resume. And you should also try to be as specific about these experiences as you can be. Include your specific role or title, the organization, the dates you did everything, and of course a location if it's relevant. Finally, you can see a skills section. Skills sections are best when they're very specific. So you can see this student included computer software they can work with, equipment, functions that they're capable of doing. You might also include things like language skill. And again, just think about what's going to be most important for the person reading it. What's going to tell them that you have the skills that you need to do the job well. Okay, once all of your content is on the page, we want to start polishing it up. Make sure that your job descriptions are detailed and specific. Each line should start with a strong action verb and should reference the skill you used to complete a task. In this example, the student describes their work at Best Buy by saying they operated a cash register quickly and precisely, responsible for an average of $1,000 per shift. So this is better than simply saying operated cash register, because we're tying it into an overall attention to detail and an ability to handle a large sum of cash. Help them to see what you did well in that job. Also check to make sure that nothing is left out. A lot of questions on resumes come up because students have such varied experiences. A good rule of thumb is to think big. If your resume is too long, and it should only be 1 page, think about what jobs or experiences are most important and which are least important. Think about what is most critical for someone to know about you right now. Finally, double and triple check your resume to be sure there are no typos. So after all of the content is really solid and you're at a page in length, you want to take a minute to think about format. This sometimes trips up students, but the best thing that you can do is to create a unique but professional format that's easy to read. I push students not to use the templates you can find on Word, Pages, or online for 2 main reasons. 1, because they're not unique, other people will have a resume that looks just like yours. And because they're inflexible. So when you start to move around content, it makes it really difficult when you're locked into a template. You want to, of course, keep in mind the expectations in your industry. So if you're doing visual work, your resume should also be a design sample. Graphic design, photography, these are good examples. Whereas for things like part-time jobs, service work, retail jobs, etc., you want a much more straightforward format. Stick between 10 and 12-point font so it's easy to read. And again, make sure that it's readable, that sections are clearly separated using bolding, lines, underlining, and that the flow is natural. Last but not least, resume feedback is critical. Get at least 2 sets of eyes on your work, both to check for typos and also to make sure your resume is having the impact that you intend it to. A career development specialist is available in Career Initiatives. You can schedule by emailing careerhelp@colum.edu or stopping by 623 South Wabash, Suite 307.